First of all, I'd like to welcome you here today to this spot on this special day for our nation to commemorate the Irish volunteers from the companies from Macroom, Clondrohid, Ballinagree, Killamatra, Carriganima, who marched out from here in Easter 1916. They marched out to Carriganima in the first stage of the southern part of the 1916 Rising. It was intended that these local units would act as the advance guard for the Cork City and Cove units of the Irish Volunteers under the great patriots of Tomás McCurtain and Terence McSweeney, who were making their way to Macroom in order to link up with companies from Kilmurray, Bandon, Ballindee and other units from South and West Cork. They planned to use the arms from the ship the Odd, which was due to land in the south, the land in Kerry. However, because of the loss of the Odd, this part of the Rising did not occur, but these men would soon get their chance during the War of Independence. We remember those in Dublin and elsewhere who took the field of battle on that Easter week, many of whom sacrificed their lives for freedom. We are here to remember a time when Irish men and Irish women did great things. However, we do this at a time when the Irish people are riven by self-doubt and division. We see around us the failures of Irish men in the banks and the churches and the damage it has caused. Failures caused by vanity, greed and weakness. The Irish men failed to do what was right or did not care what was right or wrong. These failures have caused a great loss of hope and self-belief among the Irish people. We seem to have come to a stage where we have a doubt in our ability to succeed as a nation. However, in these dark economic days, we should not forget that we have faced such dark days in the past and rose to these challenges. On this day, 94 years ago, a small band of Irish men and women marched out from Macroom, poorly armed with shotguns and pikes, to take on the largest empire in the history of the world. This small band was trying to do what 11 million Germans failed to do. These men, whose own parents would have remembered the famine, and whose own grandparents would have told them the stories of the men who were named inside the monument here in Macroom Castle, who were hung, drawn and quartered in this very square, and whose decapitated heads were placed around the square as an example to all those who defied this mighty empire. But the men and women of 1916 faced those challenges head on with the courage and bravery, knowing the sacrifices that would have to be made to achieve our freedom. When Padraig Pearse addressed the court in his court-martial in 1916, saying what would come to be some of his last words on earth, he said, "When I was a child of 10, I went down on my knees by my bedside one night and promised God I would devote my life to the effort to free my country. I have kept that promise. First, among all earthly things, as a boy and as a man, I have worked for Irish freedom and helped to organise, to arm, to train, and to discipline my fellow countrymen to the sole end that, when the time came, they might fight for Irish freedom. This time, it seems to me, did come, and we went into the fight. I am glad we did. We seem to have lost, but we have not lost. To refuse to fight would have been to lose. To fight is to win. We have kept the faith with the past. We have handed on a tradition to the future. If you strike us down now, we shall rise again and renew the fight. You cannot conquer Ireland. You cannot extinguish the Irish passion for freedom. If our deed has not been sufficient to win freedom, then our children will win it by a better deed." These are the words of Padraig Pearse, who sacrificed all for his people, not for power or for money, for he knew he would die with neither. Not because he thought we were perfect or without flaws or failing, for he knew us too well to believe this. Not because he thought we would go forth to be a perfect nation, for he knew all nations make mistakes occasionally. But because he knew that Ireland unfree would never be at peace. In the midst of our difficulties, we can sometimes only see the problems ahead and think them insurmountable. We see the challenges and sometimes doubt our ability of our country to succeed, But as a people, we have faced deadly challenges in the past and persevered, and have come out the other side a better and stronger nation. This too shall pass, and we are not the first country in the world to go through these financial meltdowns, and for sure we will not be the last. Other countries have faced similar problems and survived, so do not leave self-doubt take hold of our hearts, because these are black days. We too will face our problems, and we too will survive. We are here as a nation because of the actions of great men such as Pearse, Connolly, Robert Emmet and Wolfe Tone. However, their deeds would not have been possible without the courage of ordinary men and women who stood beside them. Not all their names are carved in stone like those in this monument. Not all their brave deeds are known to us. Not all their names will be remembered. But by their deeds, both large and small, we were able to achieve our freedom. And to preserve here today, and our presence here today, to cherish their memory, we contribute our small deed to the cause of our country. Now, I don't know what Ireland's future will hold for us, and no doubt we as Irishmen will fight and argue about the best way to deal with our problems ahead. However, we should remember that we are one nation and one people, and we stand or fall together. So let us now remember those who have died for our freedom and pledge ourselves to be worthy of their sacrifices. I'd like to invite Seamus Harrington, a nephew of William Harrington, whose name is on this monument, to lay a wreath in memory of the great men and women who sacrificed all for the struggle of freedom. I'd like to invite Micheál O'Herlihy to lead a recitation of the Decade of the Rosary in memory of our patriot dead, and also in memory of those who have died over the last year since we were here last, particularly some great supporters of this commemoration like Mickey Town Bradley and others. So I'd like Micheál.
Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Many that are really talent to grass to Tantian and soccer to span who did not have a span to other wings. Commemorating that we are long to cross the time here and talk to spend who does not have a spend a third of the rees. Commemorating that we are long to cross the time here and talk to spend who does not have a spend a third of the rees. Lord and I like a son walk out the spinner. Soon Sherry that the Hanaman of the Ine are shade against 4 bosses on the heron. Then when I had a Sunday case, we leave them.
I'd now like to invite Macroom to come forth and read the proclamation.
Public na hÉireann, the Irish Provisional Government of the Irish Republic to the people of Ireland. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organisations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army. Having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment. And supported by her exiled children in America and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory. We declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of that right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished the right, nor can it ever be extinguished except by the destruction of the Irish people. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom and sovereignty. 6 times during the past 300 years, they have asserted it to arms. Standing on that fundamental right, and again asserting it in arms, in the face of the world, we hereby proclaim the Irish Republic as a sovereign, independent state. And we pledge our lives and the lives of our comrades in arms to the cause of its freedom, of its welfare, and its exaltation among the nations. The Irish Republic is entitled to and hereby claims the allegiance of every Irishman and Irish woman. The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and all of its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally, and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered by an alien government which have divided a minority from the majority in the past. Until our arms have brought the opportune moment for the establishment of a permanent national government representative of the whole people of Ireland, and elected by the suffrages of all her men and women, the provisional government hereby constituted will administer the civil and military affairs of the Republic in trust for the people. We place the cause of the Irish Republic under the protection of the Most High God, whose blessing we invoke upon our arms, and we pray that no one who serves that cause will dishonor it by cowardice, inhumanity, or rapine. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valor and discipline, and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny to which it is called.
I'd now like to welcome our guest from Duhala, Jack Roche.
Here le agus a cardde. Is mór an as atá an bheithes a hanú meas an overíis. Agus a céad síos pa cogádas a gháil go dí an cuisteach chur an cuine cáin a réig gach blian, rinne blianta. Chun an ára hóta dós, na daine a chaile héal a raibh cogan na sirse, agus mór na daine a chaile héal a raibh seachtain Casca in Lackley. We're assembled here today, as is happening hopefully in many parts of the country, to pay tribute to those who fought for Irish freedom, and particularly those who came out in 1916. And let us for a moment remember the young men and women in Dublin who took part in the 1916 rising. Many of the leaders were intelligent men. They knew they would not win a battle, but they knew that it was necessary to make a sacrifice to ensure that the people of Ireland would have a pride in their own country and would continue a struggle to gain a freedom for it. We are all well aware of what happened in Dublin. The 1916 rising went on for a considerable period, after which there was a surrender, and the leaders of that revolution were all executed. Their names are written in blood in the history of Ireland. But in doing so, they are reawakened an interest and a desire for freedom in this country. And right round the country, from 1916 to 1921, we had a guerrilla warfare which the British could not win, ultimately decided that they would have to agree to a treaty and a truce. Unfortunately, that treaty and that truce did not bring total freedom to Ireland. And for many years, the 6 northeastern counties of our country were subject to the same sort of discrimination that we had experienced for the previous 800 years. And that has continued up to recent times. Efforts have been made, and we hope that a peace and a security that has come to Northern Ireland will continue to do so. In coming to celebrate the activities of Easter week, we should also remember all the people who strove through every generation for freedom from this country. Way back from the 12th century, when Britain occupied this country, and I suppose they only partially occupied it, particularly around the Dublin area where they actually wired it in and called it the Pale, and it is known as the Pale to this day. And I suppose it was in the end of the 16th century, 1583, with the plantation of Munster, that the British took complete control. And in reading through that history, the frightening experience of the period of the plantation of Munster. And when we come to think, and I'm sure that the people involved in the 1916 rising and the people who were prepared to rise around this country were aware of what previous generations of Irish people had gone through, right back to the plantation of Munster. And I suppose Queen Elizabeth at the time, put the whole of Munster to the sword. Cattle, land was burned, cattle killed. It became a desolate province. I suppose it's best described by Edward Spencer, who is probably nearly revered today in certain areas because of his poetry. But of course he was a secretary to Lord Grey, who was the command of the British forces in Munster at that particular time. But he gave a description. He said, "Out of every hill and out of every glen they came, the people, crawling forth upon their hands, for their legs could not carry them. They looked like anatomies of death, like corpses crawling out of their graves. They eat the dead carcasses, and happy were those that could find them, and themselves afterwards, in so much as that the very corpses they spared not to scrape out of their graves, so that they could eat them." That was the start of the British occupation of this country, and it continued right on until, I suppose, the most documented evidence we have again was the famine. And one of the greatest documents we have on the famine was the On Scale Féin, written by Antahar Padar O'Lara. I am sure everyone in Macroom have read that book. It was my school book going to school in 6th class. And you know, it influenced my whole life. The massive description of the famine given by Antahar Padarol in this area. You know, the corpses, whoever can forget the story of Patrick Buckley, of Patrick and his wife Kit, who and his 2 children came into the poorhouse here to the workhouse here in Macroom. He was separated from his wife, and the 2 children were separated. And when the man and wife eventually found that the 2 children had died, they went out, left the poorhouse, the workhouse, and went out to Carrigastyra, where their 2 little children had been dumped into a grave. And they went from there to their own home, and the following morning they were found with he having her feet under his arms in an effort to keep her warm and keep her alive. You know, who could forget that story? Who could forget the other stories? Antahar Padar mentioned about the first time he came to Macroom that he see what he thought were 2-3 black balls in top of poles here on the castle. And when he found out more, he found out about the skulls of 3 of his own neighbours, Cormac, Callahan and Tig Mulcahy, who were executed here, and several other instances. And that must have been in the minds of the people when the 1916 rising came about. It drove them to that. Again, we must ask, when we are commemorating people like that, we must remember the United Irishmen, the Young Irelanders, the Fenians, and all those, men of Wexford, all those who in their own time arose out and made major contributions. Unfortunately, they were not successful. Fortunately for us and for Ireland ever since, the 1916 rising was the catalyst which brought about the freedom for Ireland as a result of the guerrilla warfare that was carried on here in all over the country, and particularly we are proud of the fact that it was carried on in Rebel Cork. We all remember Kilmichael, we remember Crossbarry, we remember all the other great ambushes and fights that took place. And as a result of all that, we have enjoyed a level of freedom in this country. But there is a great fear that we would forget the sacrifices of our own people. I am extremely critical of the education system in our own country at this present time. Young people today have no idea what happened. Somehow or other, the history of this country is being brushed under the carpet. Recently, I was teaching a group of young people one of our old Cayley dances, the Bridge of Athlone. And during a bit of a break, I said to them, I presume you know what's about. No, they knew nothing about it. I said, I'd better start at the beginning. You had the Battle of the Boyne. Oh yes, something to do with Paisley. That was the information they had on the Battle of the Boyne. When I explained about the Irish being defeated in the Boyne and retreating across the Shannon and trying to defend Connacht with the assistance of the Shannon, and the great fight that took place in the Bridge of Athlone when the Williamite army tried to pass on, they never heard it. When we went on to another dance, the Walls of Limerick, to my shock and horror, they never heard of the Treaty of Limerick, they never heard of Patrick's Horsfield, they never heard of the Wild Geese. What kind of a country have we when we have an education system that does not impart the history of this country fairly and honestly on our young people? And that's not happening today. In the past, we had organisations who filled in this. One remembers the Gaelic League and the great work that was done by the Gaelic League. All that is past, and today young people are being kept totally in the dark. And there's no doubt in my mind that if young people were really told the truth, they would have a greater understanding and a greater appreciation and a greater pride in their own country. And I would appeal to all the authorities, to do something about this immediately. It is okay while commemorations like this take place, because it will awaken in the people, and young people particularly, the history of their own country. But unfortunately, commemorations like this may not continue into the future, and we will end up as a nation uninformed sort of barbarians who will know where we came from and will know nothing and have no pride in our own country. It is important that we avail of every opportunity now to ensure that our authorities bring about a proper history classes to our schools and to inform all of the great sacrifices that were made by the people of this country in the past. We are a proud nation. We are proud of the people who fought to bring the freedom to this country. Let us not fail them. Maybe we haven't lived up to the highest expectations. The chairman here opening the meeting today mentioned the current problems of the country. And while we think they're great problems, you know, they're small in comparison with the problems we had in the past. No doubt this country will come through those problems, however long it takes, and Ireland will again become a great nation. But in the meantime, we were all obliged to make a contribution. Our contribution is very small. The contribution that we are asked to make, be it wage cuts, be it shorter, longer working hours. And I was listening to a teacher the other day, and she was complaining that she's expected to work 1 hour extra per week. Now, the first thing I found out is that a teacher's hour is 50 minutes. I didn't know how that happened. But I thought back to my own school days. And when the schoolmaster in my school, a man called Johnny Kelleher, who originated from Killaha out there in Denfles near Killarney, for 30 years he was the principal teacher in my school. He worked 1 hour a day, every day of that 30 years for nothing. The children were not left out of our school until 4 o'clock. That was the 5th, 6th and 7th class. There was 7th class that time because there was no such thing as secondary education or third education. But that schoolmaster gave 1 hour of his life, of every day, of every week for 30 years. And I think it would be appropriate as well that we would remember these school teachers, because God knows they taught the history of this country. They built up this country. They provided an education for children at that time when they were preparing them for life. Nowadays in national schools they're just preparing children for secondary level, and the people at secondary level they're being prepared for third level. But at that time all those old school teachers, you know, prepared children for life, and they made a bloody good job of it. And those are the people that built this country, and those are the people that they educated who took part in the guerrilla warfare during the War of Independence in Ireland. And when we are remembering those men, we must remember the men who taught them the history which lead them to do that. And while we are talking about the men of Ireland who took part in all those wars, let us remember as well very, very sincerely the people who supported them, the homes in which they were welcomed into. And do we realize the danger that was when these people were welcomed into their homes? There are many instances where children were taken out of their beds and families were taken out of their beds to let the volunteers sleep at night. Yet when we are commemorating our patriot dead, let us also remember all those who supported them. I want to sincerely compliment the group here in Macroom who annually put forward this commemoration, and indeed the other commemorations through the county. And it is a pity if the transferring of information and the history of this country is left to groups like this. But unfortunately, it looks to me that is the way it is going to be. And let us hope that there will be people from generation to generation who will continue to organize these functions and ensure that the sacrifices made by all the people of this country over a 700 or 800 year period are never forgotten.
Thanks very much, Jack. That was very inspiring words, and all done without notes, as you can all see. I'd like to invite Michael Bradley and forward, and the Piper Donald Keller to play the national anthem.
Sing a fianna fáil, a toffley owl erin, buin dar slú, hartlín dar aini chuin, fe void veser, Shantir a sing sir fasta, ni og far, feintir on of entron, anok daems of our loving, legyan erheil chon voish nusa. screch, Feilach na bile, Shalev Kani, Ora.